spin axis, which is when the ball is rotating, the angle of rotation is going to be driven by many aspects of the kinetic chain, but we can trace it in many cases back to the drive leg position or the initial drive leg movement. You also hear people say, they'll call it like a pronation supination bias, meaning like when you go to release, you're more supinated on the side of the ball, or when this guy or someone else goes to release, they're more pronated on the ball. And that's going to also determine the axis. It's going to determine the spin. So someone's more supinated, they're going to probably more than likely have more horizontal movement. They probably have more cut. If someone's pronated, they're more than likely going to have more vertical movement. They're going to have, if they have any cut, it's going to be arm side run. And you know, you'll hear organizations say that, well, that's what you are. So it's like, if I'm more supinated release, I'm more biased to supination, then that's who you are. So you got to build your pitches off of that. You can do that, but I would say too, you can also get more pronated or more neutral at your release point if you understand how it all works through the kinetic chain or through the body. I would also recommend you understand that, because there's a lot of injury that comes from supinated release points, you know, horizontal release points. If you look at the studies, you're going to see a lot of injury, a lot more injury in those horizontal release points than you're going to see in over top or pronated release points. And you got to be aware of that. I had a great pitcher come through here, Chris Medlin, major league pitcher, and he had 2 Tommy Johns. He was a 2 Tommy John and then had rotator cuff issues after that. He was going to retire, and I convinced him not to retire, and I trained him and got him back to the big leagues. One of the key things that was going on is he was very supinated at release. And because of that, he would throw a slider there where he would kind of drag his arm and push, and he would get a lot of arm side run from it because it was pretty much just fading and losing spin and that kind of sinking change-up effect. Great pitch for him, but the problem is it led to the UCL damage multiple times because of the dragging of the arm to be in that supinated release with that horizontal run. So I told him, if we're going to get his arm back and his health back, obviously we did a lot of strength and conditioning that rebuilt him. But also too, I told him, with that, we're going to make biomechanical changes. We're going to fix the things that led to this. And it's going to be very similar to what I'm going to map out you to today that caused this. And we're going to fix this problem. And you're probably more than likely going to get more neutral or even maybe more pronated. And all your spin's going to change. So I said the only negative here is your spin's going to change. But the interesting thing is when his spin started to change and he started getting more vertical, he went back to his curveball he threw in minor league ball. So he actually resorted back to the pitches he had when he came up. So he learned basically to throw those pitches again. Now I'm sure he would have loved to have that change up back, and it's more than like something we could have done over time in a healthier way. But just to get him back and get him healthy, he started throwing his old pitches he threw in minor league ball again. So that basically showed you he had a more supinated bias, and then we turned him back to a more neutral release point, which changed a lot of his pitches, but more importantly, it changed his health. So you do got to be aware, if you're accepting your release point is, oh, this is just who I am, and I'm just going to stay here and build pitches from here. Those pitches or that release point could also make you more susceptible to injury. And I know there's not enough coaches out there that are helping you truly understand how this works. And I believe a lot of people are pushing themselves into injury without having that understanding of how the kinetic chain works. So let's dive into it. So think about it. Everything that happens to this ball is coming from your body. Therefore, the release I'm putting on the ball, which is where the energy goes into the ball, which will dictate a lot of what the ball does, is coming from the initial movement. So we can map pretty much the initial movements to the release position. Because keep this in mind, the arm doesn't move on its own, by itself, or dominate the movement. It's a more passive mover. It's receiving energy. It's funneling energy is a better way of putting it if you're using the kinetic chain well. And it's therefore going where the trunk sends it. So if my trunk, like I always say, if my trunk is very rotational, my arm wants to fly out. That's what the centrifugal force would do. But if my trunk is very linear, then the energy is going more forward, so the arm's going to want to fly and distract towards the target as opposed to away from the target. So that's what we would have to do. If I'm a very much early sidearm fly out, you just need to learn to get more contralateral and get your energy going more forward than in rotation, and that will fix your problems. You'll see a lot of coaches do a way that I would say be careful with. You could do as a last resort, but I'm saying be careful with. I'd rather not do this. I'd rather teach you a better way. They will force you inside 90 if you have that rotational fly out release, because what they're trying to do is trying to put your arm in a position to not fly out so early or not fly out so far so you can get to a better release point. But that's a late correction upstream in the kinetic chain, and it can be fighting a lot of the natural forces that want to go through your body. Like I said, the arm goes where the trunk sends it. So you're fighting that. And a lot of guys would get bicep pain by holding inside 90 and fighting the fly out, which isn't good because that can lead to labrum tears, shoulder impingements, even UCL damage. So that's why I don't believe it's a good adjustment, because it comes with a lot of wear and tear in fighting the problem. As opposed to fixing the problem and changing the movement of the trunk, you're just putting the arm in a position to fight against the trunk problem. And I know it isn't the best way to do that. So be careful with that. And if that's what you're doing, that's why I'd recommend you learn from us. We're going to teach you how to fix the trunk and not just overcompensate for it. So let's talk about how the kinetic chain drives your release point, therefore is going to drive the spin on the ball. When you plant your back foot, where your shin goes, the shin is the first force vector in the movement. That means when force comes out of the ground, and it does, because the back leg is the propeller, which pretty much every study looking at the lower half is going to tell you the back leg propels the energy forward, the front leg catches that energy, brakes, and pushes the energy back. The back leg pumps the energy in, the front leg pumps it out. So once again, if the arm goes where the trunk sends it, where the energy of the trunk sends it, if the back leg pumps the energy into the trunk and the front leg pumps it out, that also means the legs are pumping the energy to the arm. So if the back leg goes to pump the energy in and the shin goes too far over the toes, starts to turn inward and point towards, for a righty, towards third base, right? Then what's going to happen is that's where the energy is going to want to go, in that direction. And yes, you can fight to correct, lean back, pull across, but there's still a good chance your arm's going to fly on that in correction. Because the energy is going that way, the trunk's going to pull back in rotation. That's a rotational movement. The arm's going to fly out. So it's almost impossible to allow your knee to go forward, your shin to push towards third base, and think you're going to get the ball going forward or your trunk going forward. The only way you could do that is with the front leg. The front leg would have to be super aggressive to overcome the energy wanting to fly out arm side. Because like I said, the front leg pumps the energy out. So that's where you could fix the problem. And you'll see that. I do see that in big leagues, but you got to understand that is an incredibly aggressive front leg stability or break and extension in a split second, literally 0.1 second or less, to recorrect that energy, and it has to be incredibly aggressive. So that's a tough play to try to fix the back leg problem with the front leg. The goal would be to not allow the shin to go too far over the toes, to turn towards or pull you towards third base. You would want to sit more back in the hip, get the trunk more contralateral. Now the shin is more vertical, and move the energy lateral through abduction, and then drive. Now the shin is pushing the energy towards the target. Now there's a much better chance that the trunk's going to follow suit and keep driving the energy forward, and the front leg's going to help. And now you're in a more vertical slot. So if I'm a guy who's going shin over knee, push to third as a righty, obviously I'm going to try to fight it, but my arm's going to want to go in that direction. It's more than likely want to fly out and not allow my trunk to go forward, and I'm going to be on the side of the ball. If I want to make a correction and get more neutral, I'm going to sit in the hip, more contralateral with the trunk, more lateral abduction, and as I drive and stabilize and hold that position, now as I come around, my energies want to go forward. Now I'm going to be more on top of the ball, and you can see it going this way. I'm on the side of the ball, sitting back, going more lateral forward towards the target. I'm on top of the ball. So it's a great way to make that adjustment. So if you're a supinated release, and all you can throw is arm side run, fastball change, and sweepers, which are slow pitches from your fastball, and you're sick of that, it's not that effective, then you need to get more in a hip loaded position, more vertical shin, more lateral momentum. Now you're getting forward, now you're getting on top, now you can get pronated. You can throw pronated pitches, pronated sliders and cutters, which are hard breaking pitches, not slow breaking pitches, and you open up your arsenal to pitch. And like I said, that's kind of what it's identical to what Chris Medlin went through. And you can adjust that anywhere in that spectrum from horizontal to vertical, from 3/4. We can make those slight adjustments through those biomechanical changes. That's the better change than pulling the arm in and fighting the horizontal release point and trying to get more vertical. That's not the correct way to do this. The optimal way to do this is better to do it through the kinetic chain. Also be aware, the only thing that you're fighting, and this still can come towards the biomechanical release, is if you're still, say you get more trunk forward, energy forward, but you're still in the side of the ball, it could be in your deviation. So this is called ulnar deviation, radial deviation. Ulnar deviation means your fingers are pointing that way. Radial deviation, this is in your wrist, fingers are pointing this way. If I'm ulnar deviated, I'm going to have a more horizontal spin axis. I almost dropped it. If I'm more radial deviated, I'm going to have a more vertical spin axis. So you could do all that great work and you're coming forward, but you're still here ulnar deviated and you're still getting a lot of horizontal movement. Or like we worked with Owen the other day, he goes in that horizontal movement and he's ulnar deviated. So every time he tried to throw a slider, he was literally underneath the ball throwing these real loopy sliders or sweepers. So that's the other thing, is in your glove, you can pull your wrist into radial deviation if that's another issue of your spin axis. So now you getting more vertical makes it easier to get ulnar or radial deviated. But the point is you might have to also address that issue. Some people more naturally on the radial side, then you'll see people naturally on the ulnar side. It's better to be on the radial side for pretty much everything, because your horizontal stuff's going to be tighter and your over the top stuff's going to be way tighter. When you get ulnar deviated, everything gets loopy and big. So be aware of this. That's also affecting it. But once again, everything this ball is experiencing and doing is coming from your body. And if you're just working on it in the wrist or in the arm path, you're not only missing the boat, more than likely you're missing the potential to make real improvements and changes, but you're more than likely dealing with a higher level of wear and tear, which is going to ultimately could be why you're injured all the time. So if you want to learn more, I'd say ask some questions here, come down to Top Velocity. Now it's, if you believe this mentality here and this methodology, which I can show you millions of studies that support it, is you need to now learn biomechanics. You have to understand how do we optimize the kinetic chain and get away from a lot of the BS out there that, oh, you know, you're not good at this, so let's just be this overcompensator. That's not the way to do this. That's just the way to stay injured and not truly optimize your potential. So I hope you enjoyed it. If you want more, let us know what else you'd like to learn about. Appreciate you watching.